Tensions between the United States and China are higher than at any point in recent memory, and I think understanding China explains a lot about what's going on in the world, so I'm going to explain it all like we're on FaceTime so that we all understand. So an important thing to understand is that for the past several decades, there was this predominant view among economists and foreign policy experts that China was going to replace or rival the United States as a global superpower, and certainly China is a very powerful economic and military entity. But the idea of the Chinese decade or century rising above the United States as this last global superpower post USSR has kind of been replaced as like the Chinese decade or century that never came. But why? So in the 70s and 80s, Deng Xiaoping was this leader of China who liberalized the economy. So China is a communist totalitarian state, but there is this ability meritocratically to rise up within that party to get into the leadership. So being a member of the Communist Party is not something all Chinese are. Like very small percentage of the Chinese population is a member, but it's very good for you military, or if you want to be in the military, if you want to be a politician. If you want to be a politician, you have to. If you want to be in the an economically successful person, you want to have that Communist Party membership because it's like a status symbol. And it helps you with connections. In the 90s and early 2000s, China was liberalizing their economy, so they have this like hybrid system. Like there are market freedoms, but there are no political freedoms, and there's a mix. It was a mixed economy, and that was because of the reforms made by Deng Xiaoping. Xi Jinping is the current leader of China. He has gone back on those reforms. He's like a true Leninist, true believer in this party system. And also, he arose as like the son of one of these, like, there's this like, the people involved in the revolution are considered like royalty. Like royalty in the Communist Party, the people who helped bring about the communist regime with Mao Zedong, who's like the founder of the modern China. His father was part of that, but he was like purged several times during different party purges where they removed people for corruption. And that left a serious mark on their current leaders. So understanding that Xi Jinping is a true believer, he has that background that really emphasizes his like views among that system, and he's a true nationalist, true believer in like a unified China. That means like he wants Taiwan, which is independent, but the world doesn't acknowledge that. They kind of act like that, but nobody explicitly acknowledges that Taiwan is its own country, even though Taiwan is a liberal democracy. It's a separate island that is very concerned about the tensions between America and China because they want to be free. But understanding that the current leader, Xi Jinping, is a true believer who wants a unified China, who wants to expand in a nationalist way. And it's driven by nationalism, not like necessarily economic incentive. And so he's also kind of moved back on some of these market reforms, like definitely reined in the like this capitalism that was coming in, reined it in, definitely cracked down on the military. He's purged hundreds of top generals. China is now left without any top generals who have actual combat experience. That's a function of both China has not been in a war in a long time, since like the 70s, with little skirmishes with Vietnam. And the purges, because he's concerned about corruption, but he also wants to consolidate power. He removed term limits for the president. He's cracked down on dissidents. A lot of stuff going on in China that I could do a whole video about, but understanding his philosophy and the way that's happened is important. I think there was also this prevailing view that if China opened up to the rest of the market, which it has, like global trade, the impact of economic liberalization, that would all lead to political liberalization. That hasn't happened. It just hasn't. Everyone kind of thought that would happen. Didn't happen. Instead, under the current leader, they've cracked down more, and the state has become increasingly a surveillance state even more. They've cracked down on political opposition. They've cracked down on religious minorities like Muslims and Buddhists in Tibet especially. And so China, though, the prevailing public sentiment is of an America in decline. But, and some of that might be true, like the American economy is struggling. What it's not doing is struggling as much as China's. China has a real estate crisis. They have rampant youth unemployment that exceeds the United States's, and they have a general economic sentiment among consumers that the economy is not doing well. Now, they think America is doing worse in a function of the propaganda. There's no free media, but also just a function of the way our government has acted to the rest of the world recently has, for obvious reasons, left negative taste in the mouth of and given fodder to propaganda outfits, and just left a negative taste in the mouth even in free democracies. But so China is facing economic problems. They have a nationalist leader who is increasing the surveillance state. The public supports that because they have different information than the rest of the world. And they also have this looming demographic crisis. The one-child policy in China was, if you live in a city, you can have one. Basically, like if you live in a city, you can have one children. Rural communities were allowed to have more. That was to stop this, what they believed was a ticking population time bomb. But instead, our ability to produce food and China's wealth growth, still many people in China are very poor, much poorer than people in the United States, but they expected this demographic crisis that didn't come, and instead it has created one, because now there are way too many men in China relative to women, like tens of millions of more men, because it's a patriarchal society, like most societies, and people, when they could only have one child, they wanted to have a man, and so they selectively made that happen. And now they've gotten rid of that policy to try to spur people to have children, but it's done such psychological, social damage that people don't want to have more than one child, both because everyone they know and all their parents had one child, and they associate having more children with rural communities, which are less wealthy, poor. It's a status symbol, just have one child. So they have this demographic crisis. They have way more older people than younger people. They have a real estate crisis. They are currently losing in the AI race, but they are catching up, but they don't have the infrastructure for the capacity to function all that AI. They have to figure that out very quickly. And they have this nationalist leader who wants to expand their country. And so that affects a lot of decisions other countries are making. It affects a lot of other countries because China historically has had this Silk Road initiative where they invest in developing nations to try to spur interest, but that will change if they can't afford to. And so to understand China and what's going on in the world, you just need to understand that all countries are having a lot of problems right now because the global economy is not good, but they're affecting different countries more than others. And unlike a liberal democracy, the Chinese public has very little influence over what their leaders do.